Hello, everybody. I hope you had a great day and a great weekend. It was probably a very long one, but also exciting considering how many events you've got to attend. And right now, we're at the last panel. Right after this, there will be the final pitching event. I'm super happy to be here. My name is Michelangelo. We're going to be moderating today's event on the student startup ecosystem. I'm an early stage investor at Stride VC. We're a venture capital fund here based in London. And I'm also the founder of Almost Founders, which is a podcast for student founders. And today I'm joined by Paris, Jack, and Riam. They're all very, very experienced when it comes to the student startup ecosystem. Jack, very briefly, he's a PPE student at Oxford, where he runs the amazing OX1 incubator. He's also a campus analyst at the VC firm Remus, and that previously founded Oxford first ever talent incubator Unbox. That used to place university students into selected projects and internships at startups. Riam is an absolute expert in the university startup ecosystem. She has founded not one, but two companies in this space, the Academia Venture Builder ConceptionX, which just had a demo day, and the Academia Grants Matching Platform CrowdElix. And Paris is a professor of entrepreneurship and managing director of the Venture Lab at the Madrid-based IE Business School. It's such a pleasure to be here. Jack, do you want to give a brief intro about yourself, but just one or two words, and then Riam and Paris, so that it comes from you and not from me?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for the thanks to organizers for the invite. I'm very happy to be here. I'm actually calling from my dorm room in Oxford at the moment, so there's a good scene for us to talk about European university startup scene. I guess I will just add one more note to what I've done before. I previously also built an AI SaaS and more recently biotech as well. So I'm sort of been through the sort of student founder journey, and I'm really excited to start this conversation. Thank you all.
Riam?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invite as well. So my name is Riam, and I run something called ConceptionX. ConceptionX is a cross-university program that helps PhD students launch deep technology startups whilst they are still at the university. So in our model, the universities themselves are the incubators, and the student's thesis is the basis on which the startup is built. So we started as a pilot in University College London, but now we have students from across 30 universities. And we've helped 170 teams of PhDs so far since 2018. They've raised upwards of 15 million pounds, I think, so far in early stage VC, but that number is compounding each month at this point. And we've had one exit already, which is super exciting. And I think through ConceptionX, we've just learned a lot about how students can become founders. We don't call them entrepreneurs, we call them venture scientists at ConceptionX, and maybe we'll touch on this a bit later.
That's fantastic. And Paris?
Hi, Michelangelo, welcome. So I run the accelerator at IE Business School. Before that, I was an entrepreneur myself. I had 5 startups. IE Business School, I'm not sure if you know, but it's the #1 school for entrepreneurship, according to the Financial Times in Europe, and we're number 8th in the world. I've been running the accelerator for the last 11 years. We accelerate about 200 startups every year. About 35% of them actually, go beyond 3 years, and about 30%, or between 25 and 30% of our alumni become entrepreneurs. So I've got a lot of experience in working with students. I'm really excited to be part of this, and I'm looking forward to the panel today.
That's fantastic. Then coming off just what you said, 35% of students from your accelerator continue on years, right? Correct? And I'm wondering, since you've been a professor at IE since 2009, how has this number, if you're aware of it, shifted throughout the years? Or what other changes have you noticed throughout the years relevant to the student ecosystem and the student choices?
Well, what's interesting is that, usually when you think about students going to business school, you think about people that are looking to move up in their careers in the same job or make more money. But what we're seeing more and more every year is that more and more students that are going on to graduate school and any kind of master's, they're looking for a professional change in their life. They're not really happy with the 9-to-5 job that they have at a big company. And so many more of these students are turning to entrepreneurship as a career choice. If you guys are too young, but 20 years ago, if you had said to somebody you're going to be an entrepreneur, they would have said to you something like, why don't you get a real job or something like that, especially in Europe. And so what we're seeing, and I'm seeing every year, is that more and more students are saying, you know what? I don't care if there's less job security. I don't care if the pay is less at the beginning. I want to do something that I enjoy doing. And I think that also goes back to something that I always say to my students, is that there are two types of people in the world: Friday people and Monday people. Friday people hate what they do, and it's like they're looking forward to the weekends. You look at them on Thursday night and they're smiling. I've always been a Monday person. And I think more and more people are realizing that 40% of your life at least is going to be work. And so you can't live your life as a Friday person. People want to enjoy what they're doing. And I think that's why entrepreneurship is becoming more of a lifestyle than just only a career choice.
100%. That makes absolute sense. And I'm wondering Jack, since right now you're a student, you're the only student on the panel that is right now at Oxford. I'm wondering, what do you think about these words? Do you agree with the general idea that there is an increase in people and in students that are more keen to be entrepreneurs compared to previous years?
I think on the whole, that's definitely correct, but I would have a more nuanced view on that. So it depends on two things, two variables. The first variable is the age, and the second variable is personality. So the first variable, age, from my observation, OX1 was founded 2018, and I've been running it for the recent 2 years. And we have a lot of postgraduates in our cohort, and we actually did not target postgraduates specifically, but sort of via some self-selection mechanism, we get a lot of DPhils and PhDs who want to start startups that are not relevant to their research, and we have a lot less undergraduate who are looking to be a founder. So I think there's definitely the sort of the zeitgeist of the Oxford is still pretty much in the professional services, being a banker, lawyer, consultant. Entrepreneurship at undergraduate level, if you're 20, 21, number one, you're seen by British culture, especially Oxford culture, as taking too much risk and perhaps even a bit of a hubris as well, a bit too much arrogant, I suppose. That's the feeling I get. Some people might perceive it. And then the second variable, personality, which goes back to risk aversion and openness. And it correlates with age as well, from my observation, that a lot of the postgraduates tend to be a lot more open, and they tend to be they think a lot about careers much earlier, or they want the career path to be set in stone. And so they dedicate a lot more time into it compared to undergraduates.
Interesting. Riam, you at Conception X focus specifically on postgraduate and research labs and PhDs. Is that correct? Can you agree with this notion that generally postgraduates are more open compared to undergrads?
Yes and no, in some ways. So we work with PhDs only. And the thing is, we work with a specific type of PhD founder because we're talking about the kind of inventor type. So we take only scientists and engineers who want to launch companies. And I think a lot of them come into Conception X without knowing, even at that stage, what they can be within the company. And sometimes they defy their own expectations, because you have some PhDs coming in thinking, oh, I'm never going to be the CEO or business person. And then they join Conception X. And then they find out that it's quite suitable for them and that they enjoy the kind of client engagement, and they didn't know this about themselves. Whilst others think that they're definitely the CEO or whatever, then they start building the company and realize halfway through that this is definitely not what they want, and they want to go back to the lab, etc. So even within the kind of entrepreneurship space, I think it's people don't necessarily know what they want to do even at that later stage. But I think in terms of general trends we're seeing over cohorts and cohorts in universities, and especially UCL, there are more and more people who are wanting to try entrepreneurship, and that's going earlier and earlier. I think one of our, Dave Chapman, who's one of the professors at UCL, always started the entrepreneurship course with this quote. Like, he used to say that in the 80s or in the 70s, it was cool to be a rock star, but now it's cool to be an entrepreneur. So it's something that's definitely picking up. But I agree with Jack that there are some differences, and I think I went to Oxford myself, so there's definitely something in the culture there that's interesting.
Interesting. No, but this is a really cool concept that today's rock star is entrepreneurship, and I'm wondering what positive effects and negative effects this could have, because obviously the disillusion that anybody can be an entrepreneur, I'm not sure if you agree with this, but it's really hard profession overall, and it requires specific skill sets. So I would like to get your thoughts, Paris, on should everybody be an entrepreneur? Who are the right people to be entrepreneurs, and what kind of student profiles is best suited for this?
That's a very good question, and a lot of students struggle with that. At our school, we don't have, up until now, an engineering school. We're about to have one in the future, but so this is a business school without an engineering school, and a lot of entrepreneurship in the past has come from technology areas, but the reality is most startups are not technology startups, and so this idea that all of entrepreneurship has to be technology is, and everybody thinks about, the next Google, the next Facebook, is not one that, for me makes a lot of sense, because the reality is, if you look at Spain last year, the number one startup in the city of Madrid was a fruit store, these fancy fruit stores corner that, make, they sell like 3 kiwis for $5 or something like that. And so entrepreneurship is not just about technology. That's the first point I want to make. Now, does everybody need to be an entrepreneur? Not at all. We teach a lot of entrepreneurship in this school. We force every student to take at least almost 6 months of entrepreneurship, because we want them to think like an entrepreneur. And so what does it mean to think like an entrepreneur? Well, the way I like to put it is that, what does an entrepreneur see in uncertainty? Opportunity. And we just came out of COVID, more than ever, we need professionals that, see opportunity and uncertainty. And if you look at the bleeding edge companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, and the like, they're looking for people that have a lot of emotional intelligence and have some entrepreneurship background, because they think differently. They're adaptable. And so I think that everybody should study entrepreneurship in school. But I don't think it's for everybody. And I think you need to have a calling of some sort. If you're doing it for the money, what are you going to do after the 100,000 euros that you get for your startup? You're going to quit. So you need to have a personal reason. And, not to quote Simon Sinek, but it's really the why. It's why you're doing what you're doing. And that cannot be the money only, because otherwise, when you run out of money, you're going to quit. And that's not a true entrepreneur. So entrepreneurship is not for everybody. But I think the schools have a responsibility to teach entrepreneurship, because it's a different mindset. And it's a mindset that, now post-COVID, I think everybody realizes we need more than ever.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I'm actually interested because, Riam, you're seeing a completely different pool of entrepreneurs. So not business heavy, but you define them scientists. And so I'm wondering, does the same apply to the kind of students and cohorts that you are hosting, or does it differ?
Consumption is very specific. We're working with the deepest end of technology, and I agree with Paris. That's by no means, everyone. What we actually do in Consumption X is that we collaborate with business schools, so London Business School and the Said Business School, because it's good to have complementary skills as well. So a lot of the students we work with are focusing on commercializing their science, and they need to work with other people in the entrepreneurship space to help them with that as well. But I think the range of what it means to be an entrepreneur is also growing right now, and in some ways some aspects of it are also being demystified as more and more people start doing it, because I feel like what we're trying to do, at least in Conception X, is kind of go beyond the more Silicon Valley perception of what entrepreneurship is, where someone is, I mean, you know, for better or for worse, I mean, some people might disagree, but there's an idea that you just have to give up everything and, you know, start a company and, you know, take all of that risk, whereas we're trying to de-risk it in Conception X by making it run alongside the PhD. So if it works, great. If not, the students go back to the lab and finish their thesis with some new skills. And I think in some ways this has opened the door for some people who wouldn't have tried it otherwise. In terms of, you know, the risk of it. And for some, they tried it and they realized that it's for them. So I don't know. This is we don't know what effects this will have on, you know, their generation coming forward, and what type of entrepreneur this will build. But I'm excited to see how that goes.
Good. I want to get practical as soon as possible, because I assume most of our audience are probably students. And so I want to know from you, Jack, seeing at Ox One and your peers as well, what do you think are the most common mistakes that student founders make? I've seen a report from Creator Fund that says that students tend to identify problems in their own needs and experiences rather than thinking about solutions for problems faced by a wider base of consumers. This could be an example of a mistake. Do you think this is the most pressing one, or have you noticed anything else that is even more pressing, Jack?
So I think it's largely in line of what CF's report said. And I would say it's most students are not obsessed enough with the problems that they're solving, and they fall in love with a solution, right? So for OX1, we very often take in students and teams with a pre-existing solutions about a particular market problem, and number one, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, right? Student founders do tend to build products and recruitment or education because they are the consumers. They are either the consumers or they are the end user of these industries. And a lot of times they will come with, right, I'm going to build a marketplace. I'm going to build an automation SaaS. I'm going to build a, well, we are seeing less and less social network. So thank God. We do have a lot of application AI, vertical SaaS AI products. But very often they have a solution ready and they try to force fit a problem to solve. And it's reasonable for students to do it. But what sort of from our end, OX1, we have a lot of workshops on just, you know, teaching on customer development skills, and also reminding potential founders, to fall in love with users and not solutions.
Fantastic. Riam, you said that your students, you partner with business schools as well, but do you believe that the problems are similar to what Jack just pointed out, or have you seen anything else in your specific audience pool?
I think over the years, there are some trends and the biggest mistakes that they make. And the first is because we work with PhD scientists who are used to publish papers, and you don't send it to the publisher unless it's perfect. There is a streak of perfectionism in the sense that they don't show something they've built to a client unless they think it's almost there. And this is what we try to teach them, to kind of get it out there even in an imperfect state, and get some feedback on things earlier in the process. And it takes a while because, you know, they're trained in a certain way, but once they are comfortable showing an unfinished product to a client, things work better. So that's the first mistake. The second mistake they make, and it's endemic of PhDs, is that they think they can do everything in the company, because there's this kind of idea of the star PhD student, you know, who knows how to code and knows how to build and knows how to do the businessy parts. And we also try to teach them that they need to build teams and they need to learn how to ask other people for help. And, you know, I mean, you know, things vary, but over time, these are the two most common things. I think in terms of like building, falling in love with solutions rather than problems, I think there is a little bit of that. But because most of our companies are based on a PhD thesis, there's usually a problem or something that they're trying to address, whether it's a clean energy or a disease or something.
Fantastic. Yeah, Paris, I would love to open the floor for you and your thoughts on the biggest mistakes you've seen students make over the year.
Well, I agree with Jack that a lot of students are, primarily focused on the solution. But I think the biggest mistake that they make is the team. And I think having the right team is critical, and they don't realize that that's what the investors invest in. If you're an angel investor, I invest in teams. I'm an angel investor as well. I invest usually about one project every year. And if I see a really kick-ass team, I'll invest in them. And then I'll look at the idea, because I think that you can see in the eyes of these people when they're real entrepreneurs and they want to, like, the world is their oyster, and they want to succeed, and they're passionate about what they're doing. And so I think there's a combination of both, of focusing too much on solutions, but I think team is the reason why I've seen most of the startups fail over the last 11 years.
That's fantastic. I really agree with that. And I'm speaking from, Stride VC philosophy of investing as well. And I want to introduce a concept here, because I think that for us in the teams, what we look for is actually a glimmer of greatness, we call it. Something fantastic about, something magical almost about the founders. And I think he's aligned with a theme of an acronym, which is called RICH, which Jack coined. So Jack, you write about this in your newsletters and in tweets. And we've spoken about it. So I want to get your opinion on the RICH acronym. Tell us what it is and why does it matter for students?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for raising that. So the motivation for this acronym is I come across a lot of frameworks, a lot of work trying to understand what outlier talents are. And I thought it's a very vague, at the moment, a lot of vague discourse about outlier talents. So I proposed an acronym, RRCH, which stands for Rebellious, Intellectually Curious Hustler, which I try to reduce. This framework tries to reduce outlier talent into 3 psychometric personalities. And you can think of them as sort of 3 sliding scale personality, right? How rebellious you are, how intellectually curious you are, and how much of a hustler you are. And you can also map different career archetypes. You can map aspirations onto this. Now it's important for me because number one, lucky enough, I started Hacker House in Oxford and recently got some traction around the Oxford startup community. But I think most importantly, it's more that it reminds us, right? Like, to be a outlier founder specifically, what are the goals that one should strive to be, right? For example, being rebellious basically means, doing things unconventionally or just being independent. Intellectually curious means that, even if you study PPE at Oxford, you're still doing things outside of a degree, doing biotech or some random stuff, and you're intellectually open. And hustler, that simply means you're making the best out of your time, right? Being productive. So that's why I think it's an important framework.
Fantastic. And I'd have a follow-up question, which, however, I'll ask to Paris. I want to understand how universities themselves can promote this rebelliousness and this intellectually curiosity in students. Do you think it's the role of the university to promote such initiatives, or should the students themselves to be proactive and chase after this?
Well, I think the problem with universities today is that they prepare you for a predictable world. And it's not just the university, it's, undergraduate and it's high school. We're living in a world that is more unpredictable and uncertain. And they're still training us for a world that's predictable. And so I'm not sure, I necessarily need a rebellious student on my team, but you know, it doesn't hurt. But I mean, I'm looking for people that want to question the status quo, and maybe that's it. You know, I used to know a student that he used to sleep with a T-shirt that said "Question Authority," and you know, and he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I asked him, okay, so what? Tell me your idea. He spent a year saying he wanted to be an entrepreneur, and finally, I had lunch with him. I said, tell me your idea, and he said to me, well, my idea, I don't have an idea yet. And I'm like, you want to be an entrepreneur? You don't have an idea yet. And I go, okay. And then so I started asking him some questions. And after a while, he said to me, you know, I really hate bosses. And I'm like, oh, yeah, bosses suck. You know, bosses are terrible. And then he said to me later, you know what? I really hate working in teams because I end up doing all the work. And I go, yeah, teams are terrible. And so finally, I realized that this kid, you know, he didn't really want to be an entrepreneur. He was just, you know, rebellious and questioning authority. And, you know, he was just looking for an outlet. And so I think entrepreneurship, I go back to, you got to have conviction and a passion for something that means something to you. And, you know, what we're finding today, and this is something we got to be careful about, is there are a lot of people out there that don't have discipline. And by discipline, I'm not talking about military service, but they don't have this discipline of, you know, execution. And at the end of the day, you know, entrepreneurship is about execution. You can have a lot of great ideas, but if you don't execute, you're not going to go anywhere. And so I think that, you know, universities can do a much better job of giving us curriculum that allow us to think out of the box, that allow us to get ready for this world of uncertainty, that teaches us more emotional intelligence. That, you know, for example, in my school, we have a lot of diversity. We have 148 nationalities. Nothing makes your emotional intelligence grow more than diversity. Because, you know, and so diversity gives uncertainty because there are different cultures, there are different ways of looking at things. And so I think your university setting, and I think you guys probably at Oxford have a similar setting, the fact that you have a diverse setting helps with this thinking of, you know, of looking at things differently, of questioning, you know, the status quo. And so if we're talking about rebelliousness as in terms of questioning the status quo and thinking out of the box, totally agree. If it's because you don't, you know, like this kid I was mentioning, if it's something that, you know, you just don't want to deal with order, like, you know, having a boss or things like that, I don't agree with that. But I think that's not most people. But I do think, as I said, universities need to do a much better job of preparing us for uncertainty, and they don't.
Agree. Jack, do you want to reply to that? Do you want to add anything?
No, I think I agree with Paris. Yeah, it's a very good interpretation of the word rebellious. I think the central meaning I'm getting across is just be an independent thinker and doer, and like exactly like Paris said, question the status quo.
Fantastic. Riam, you've questioned the status quo throughout all of your university years, and you've really made a career out of noticing the issues within this university ecosystem because you've built 2 startups out of some sort of holes in products from universities. And so I want to understand, if you had to build another startup today around the issues that universities have when it comes to student startups, what would you do? What would your next project be?
I don't think I have the energy to build another startup right now, at least. So,
okay, well, the point of the question would be just what do you think the main issue in the university ecosystem is right now?
I think there is an issue around incentive alignment.
Sorry?
Around aligning incentives, academic progression. So, okay, I'm focused on research academics who are, you know, PhDs or older, sometimes master students. The research university ecosystem is aligned around incentives related to publications, conferences, etc. There is something emerging now with impact and research needing to have impact, but it's nowhere near there. And I think if it's about, so let's put me building another startup on the side. If there's anything universities can do, and especially at the kind of science research level, it's to start having career progression in some ways, incentivizing some of that so that more people try it. And of course, we don't want to de-risk it completely, but I do think sometimes of a world in which your PhD thesis can be a startup in some ways, rather than a thesis that you put on a shelf that no one reads and then you go work for Goldman Sachs or whoever.
Yeah.
So if you're spending 3 years doing research, maybe you can build a product or a service as part of your research. And I don't know, of course, the university system isn't built around that, neither it should be completely. But there is something there, I think.
100%. So there is actually this concept of the risking is really interesting, and I think also maybe it could be correlated to liquidity also, that is and capital that is deployed in university startups. And I'm considering now, I want to create a parallel between UK, Spanish, and the US ecosystem, and want to understand your thoughts when it comes to capital deployed to university students. What are the main differences? Obviously, there is the most imponent one, which is the amount of capital that is invested. But what about the projects and initiatives of US universities, which seem to be years ahead versus UK and Spanish universities? I don't know too much about it, so I'd love to hear more. Maybe Paris, can you open up on this one?
Okay. We are formally a Spanish university, but like I said, 5% of our students are Spanish.
Yeah.
We have 144 or 80 nationalities. Okay, so why is it that U.S. universities are leading the pack in this? And I think it has to do with a few things. One is, when we talk about risk, I like to think it more about ambition. How many of our students have ambition in Europe? And how many of our students really want to do something amazing and are willing to take risk for that? And at the end of the day, it's about opportunity cost. We talked earlier about the graduate students versus undergrads. If you look at the top entrepreneurs in the world that have succeeded, like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, a lot of these, Mark Zuckerberg, all these guys that have created one way or another amazing startups, they were all undergrads. They were not master's students or PhD students, because the risk that you have as an undergrad is much lower. As you move up, you have bills to pay, you've got mortgages, you've got kids. And so I think the issue here is about ambition. And what we're missing here is much more ambition. And in some societies, like the Spanish one, believe it or not, in Spain, if you said to somebody they were ambitious, ambition has a negative connotation.
That's great. Why do you believe that is?
I don't know. I mean, but this is not just Spain. I think it's in a lot of parts of Europe. If you said to somebody you're too ambitious, it's like an insult. And I'm like, I would love it if someone said to me I was too ambitious, but ambition does not mean that you're stepping on people and, destroying people. It means you want to get out of bed and you've got this self-motivation. And so we need to teach people to be ambitious. We need to teach people that, you need to work to do things. I was talking to the dean of Bocconi University a few years ago, and one of the students, the whole entrepreneurship club was there. And one of the students asked me, he said, "Professor, do you know that in the Italian Constitution, it says that, every man and woman has the right to a good job?" And I go, "Yeah." And he said to me, "What do you think about that?" And I said, "I'm not going to pay for that. I'm not going to pay so that everybody has the right to a good job. If they want a good job, they can work for it." But I think this is the kind of mentality that, we have this right that is creating people with no ambition. And then, half the people want to work for the government. They did a survey here 7 years ago, and 52% of young people wanted to work for the government. We got to learn to realize that we don't have any rights when it comes to a job unless you make those rights for yourself. Now, of Granted, we can have a safety net that's going to make sure that, we get an education and we have free healthcare. I love all that about Europe. But to tell people they have a right to a job is going to destroy ambition.
Interesting. I wonder if also that ambition then doesn't just have an effect on the number of startups that are born, but also the quality and the aggressiveness of the go-to-market strategy and all the other aspects of the startups within the system of the US versus the entire Europe ecosystem. And so I'm wondering, okay, if ambition is the main concept here that we have to tackle, how do you promote ambition? That it's a very delicate concept. So I'm wondering, do you, Jack or Riam, do you have any suggestions on how to promote ambition?
I think in addition to what Paris said, in the US, the concepts of individuality and standing out and everything are started very early in terms of when it starts at school, right? Like standing out, there are lots of experiments that show individualism versus collectivism. And in Europe, I mean, there are some structural difficulties in Europe, whether it's around 2-hour lunch breaks and the 4 p.m. finish in certain places. So, I mean, there's that. But I also feel like the top universities in the US are also structurally done in a way that can promote some of these things. Like if you look at Stanford and the StartX program that they have and the huge endowments from both alumni and the universities themselves that kind of circle around that, in addition to all of the hero stories coming out, whether it's Zuckerberg and whatever, there's a cultural difference, but there are also structural things that are put into place that align with this ambition. Also, I think there's something about risk and capital deployment being different here and in the US. And it's ridiculous. Like, I think there's still much more of appetite for investing in things in the US because that's where the big things happen. Whereas here, when you look at the amount of due diligence and questions that are asked in the European VC world for even small investments, there's an order of magnitude that Europe is falling behind. And it's not just, I mean, the US is doing great, but there's also China that should be mentioned as well, because, that's hugely growing right now in terms of like a VC superpower. So this is my contribution. It's a difficult thing. I don't think kind of changing the ambition of a country is something you can do within a generation. But yeah, this is what I've observed.
Very interesting. You want to add something, Paris?
Very quickly to Riam's point. The VCs are also different, and this is changing. And I think the UK is leading the pack in this.
Yeah.
But you look at the average VC in Europe. Look at where these people have come from, what backgrounds they have, and you will see that they're investment bankers or asset managers. In the US, it's different. Most VCs are former entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs. And so they look at valuations differently. They look at teams differently. And that's the only real difference between Silicon Valley and the rest of the world, is that VC just about is an ex-entrepreneur. And that's the mentality. But I think the UK is probably leading the pack in terms of Europe there. But I think that's an element that it needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, but also I think there's a large trend now of American VCs looking at UK startups. Because there's a lot of interest in this space. I mean, I can tell from our demo days at Conception X, we've had to move the timing to make it suitable for US VCs as well, because I think they're noticing that there's a lot of talent and there's less deployment of capital than they should be. And they're like, why should we wait? I mean, there's a lot of talent here and there's a lot of IP that could be taken to the US and made 100 times larger than it can be here. So why not?
I'd like to quickly add something on that. So I think the overall thesis, the hypothesis I have, is that money chases talent. So the problem with European university ecosystem, in my opinion, is not that there isn't enough money, but that there isn't enough qualified, good enough talent for tier 1 VCs to chase after. So 2 words for that, right? 2 solutions going back to the increasing ambition. The first one is that's why the framework of rich comes in. You just spread the words. I a lot of undergraduates and postgraduates in Oxford now thought, intuitively rich as an acronym is funny as hell, but also they are looking into seriously being more explicitly and vocally ambitious. And the second one is myth, right? Like Rian mentioned, myth building and tribal mentality is so important in startup that there is no myth in Oxford. Can you name a successful Oxford young founder, tech founder? Well, probably can, but it's going to take a while, right? Whereas in Stanford, you get generation successive mafias, right? So the truth is they are, and I'm actually writing a blog draft on it, and it started with Tom Blumfield from Monzo. There is a mafia there. There's 3 generations of mafia, but it wasn't explicitly spelled out. And because Oxford also does a poor job in terms of alumni engagement, and that makes everything much harder to do it from bottom up, increasing ambition.
I feel like Paris, you might have something to add over here when it comes to universities promoting and pushing out the word that there is successful founders and successful startups out of Europe and their own universities. Maybe that can help.
Yeah, but I agree with Jack and Riam that there's a handful of them, in each of these universities. But I think the other thing we don't do in Europe is celebrate these people. Let me give you an example, and this is something that I tell this story, and it surprises me sometimes. I was like 6 years ago. I was back home in San Diego, and I was with my aunt, and a friend came over, and she had a white Rolls Royce. And the friend said, Paris, can you go to the supermarket and get me some milk? And I was like, I'm not going to drive that thing. I might, crash it or something. And she said, no, don't worry. It's fully insured. And so I drove it to the supermarket. Driving this thing, when I got to the first corner, I saw people waving at me. And then when I got to the supermarket, another kid was like waving at me. And then on the way back, literally a woman, at the red light, she knocked on my window and said with me, take me with you. I want to be your slave. And I went, like in a joke, but it was like this celebration. And then I got back to the house and I was like, wow, for a minute there, I had felt like a rock star. And then I got back to Spain and I realized, and I asked people, if I had done that in Spain, do you think a lot of people would have been waving at me? No. Now, I don't know about the UK, but we don't celebrate, success. Literally in Spain, they told me people would have been asking, who's this crook that, where did he make that money? Mm-hmm. And so maybe that's an extreme for Europe, but still, do we celebrate the success of these people? Do we make them role models? Do we put them on stage? Do we showcase them? Because in America, they're doing this every day. It's in the mentality, and I'm not saying we should become like totally like that, but as an American, I love living in Europe, and I love this compromise between the 2 cultures. But I think we need to do a much better job at celebrating success.
Yeah, I agree, and I just want to address a short thing that Jack mentioned. Although I agree, it's true that money follows the talent, but I think what's happening, I think we should just be careful in saying about where talent lies, because I think that there's a lot of scientific and academic talent in Europe, and I think the money is following them because VCs in the States have noticed that they don't have the structural kind of systems around them that help them, promote these things and make them companies. And as Paris said, like actually celebrate things that they do outside the grain. And that's why it's happening. So there is talent, but I'd put it in the range of untapped potential, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, fantastic. All right, Jack, let's get back to the student ecosystem. And we touched upon this concept of celebrating talent, of being more ambitious, being more rich. And these are all great and theoretical. On a practical level, what initiatives can we start as 20 to 25 to 30 years old, to even further, what can we do on a practical level to promote all of these great points that we just raised?
Do you mean as students themselves, or
Yeah,
as us?
you can answer as a student. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I think from a student perspective is just get to building, just start building, and it doesn't matter what background you're in, right? I come from a non-technical background. I studied PPE. I built several products, failed obviously, but it was a great experience. I think another thing that in the European culture that discourages action, right? That prioritizes thinking, and the flaw of that is there isn't enough data collection, right? So data collection, in the sense of, as a founder, how do you know if your idea is good? Well, stop thinking, just go ahead and build it. Start something small MVP. Now, obviously, there is a sort of a balance between thinking and doing, but obviously, given that the zeitgeist over here is, especially in Oxford, I can speak for Oxford, is actually just thinking and no action. It would be nice to get some actions. Start, even if you know nothing about how APIs work, how web dev work, just go online, watch a few YouTube videos, be intellectually curious, right? And then hustle, and then maybe meet a few CS or software devs, and then they can get you started. And then you do customer development, you do customer interview, read the mom test, and then you just learn and fail. And most importantly, I think this culture, I think for us, like for myself as a community builder, as an organization builder, would be celebrating failure. So, and that's something that OX1 we celebrate a lot. If startups get shut down, or if teams don't work, we celebrate, because it means that's great, because it means you are not losing any opportunity cost in the future. These are the things that we can do.
Amazing. Opening up for the others, what can we do to be more proactive and to promote those points that we raised before?
Join Conception X.
That's fair.
I mean, I think as universities, I think universities try to promote entrepreneurship. I mean, at least in the UK, it's almost like a box ticking exercise sometimes, where you just have this training program with the business model canvas, and it's the same stuff, same case studies. It's 1995. That needs to change. So I think encouraging people to be more innovative and not having. I think there is an idea of success being like a scarce thing. Like if you excel in one thing, you can't do well in another. And I think promoting the mentality that you can be a great researcher, but you can also build a great company at the same time, because time is elastic. It's not like one or the other. So yeah, it's a mentality thing. And I think more programs like Conception X and others that we work with, like we work with the Creator Fund as well. We exchange ideas and students, because sometimes they're too early to get an investment, so they benefit from doing Conception X first, and then they go to Creator Fund, and we do things vice versa. So collaboration amongst different institutions as well, rather than that kind of competitive thing that goes on sometimes. Like in London, UCL has its thing, and Imperial has its thing, and King's have its thing. And it's like, almost a bit of competition about who's doing more, better. Whereas, especially with like this kind of tech innovation, collaboration amongst different universities should be done a bit more. So yeah, I think these are my few.
Fantastic. Paris, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I totally agree. We need to stop this competition between universities when it comes to this. So, but I think the students have to drive this, and I think they are. Your generation, I think we belong to different generations here. Your generation doesn't want a good job. You want a great job. You want to have meaning. You're looking for meaning in your lives more than any other generation before. And I think that's why your generation is moving more towards entrepreneurship, because you realize that a lot of these dead-end jobs, 9 to 5, don't give you what you need. You're not engaged. And so I think, I don't think the universities, to answer your question, I don't think the universities are going to be driving this change. It's going to be the students. The universities are unfortunately still in another age, for the most part. And I'm not talking about all of them, but for the most part. And I think the students, you guys, the people listening today, and these accelerators and what Riam's doing, what Jack is doing, and all these people running accelerators, and also at Edventure. That's why these events are so important. We need to get people to think differently. As I like to say, we need to get everybody to become a Monday person.
Fantastic. That's a great summary, Jack. Do you have we have like 2 or 3 minutes left. If you want to add any last words, first Jack and then Rima and then Paris, on anything left of motivation or any last appeal for students. Jack.
Yeah, sure. I think this might be more specific. I think we'll start learning about industry. So if you're a technical person, if you're a CS student, if you're a developer yourself, start looking into industry and work at, it's fine to work a corporate job. Look at the problems, see what problems they're facing internally, try to build a tool around it, and that could be a good starting point towards a founder journey. My observation is a lot of students start with B2C startups, which has a specific playbook. And unless you fit into a particular founder archetype, it's very difficult to get to network effects or critical mass. Whereas B2B, you can build a micro SaaS and you can build it. You can give endocrine market liquidity. You can sell it for 6 figures, 7 figures, if you scale it enough.
Fantastic.
I think from my perspective, is to make an educated choice about what kind of life you want to live, rather than just kind of stumble through it because everybody else is. Because obviously a life in entrepreneurship, as we all know here, or in a founder's journey, highs are highs, the lows are low, and it's risky. You can't. There's no playbook of how your life will play out, and that's one choice. And some people can have a perfectly rewarding life doing a job in a company, and that's absolutely fine if you find the kind of reward and dopamine outside your regular work hours. But the important thing is not just to do something because everybody else is. Like, educate yourself and choose which one is best for you, and they both could be really good ways to live a life. I think that's it.
Amazing. Paris, on to you.
I do a lot of research on the relationship of people with uncertainty, and I separate it between their personal and their professional lives. And I think we've talked a lot about technology people here. In particular, Riam has told us about, technology PhDs and the like. So I'd like to give a message to all those nerds out there. I was a nerd when I did a bachelor's in mathematics and a master's work in computer science. If you're nerdy, don't think that you can't succeed as an entrepreneur. Most successful entrepreneurs, Richard Branson, Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, most successful entrepreneurs were nerds, and they continue to be nerds in their personal lives, because life is a balance. And so if you want to go crazy in your professional life, it's very likely that you have a nerdy personal life. We've interviewed and studied over 20,000 people in our research, and we have found that 80% of the people that are entrepreneurially minded, that are innovators, that have started startups and embrace uncertainty in their professional life because they see opportunity, hate uncertainty in their personal life. So if you're a nerd in your personal life, celebrate it, because you're more than likely to have a better chance of being successful in your professional life. And unfortunately, society doesn't tell us that. Society is always telling us that, oh, you're a nerd, you should be an engineer, and you should stay an engineer the rest of your life. You're never going to run a company. That's total bullshit. You have a better chance of running a company, because life is a balance.
I love that. We're ending on a really atypical and great note. Thank you everybody for joining us, and on to the next event. I hope you had a great hour. Thank you so much.